So over the last couple of days, there's been a lot of talk about the whole Mitch Marner situation and his agent and him coming out talking about some of the things that happened that caused him, one of the reasons that caused him to want to leave Toronto. And I wasn't going to throw my hat into the ring. But then I saw a few more things. I saw the Dangle podcast where they were, I don't want to say kind of making excuses for the fans, but I kind of wanted to get into it a little bit because as a Panthers channel, you would not think I have much of a perspective on this, but I actually kind of have a little bit of a unique perspective on this, and I will let you know that by the end of the video, you'll understand what I mean. Now, the first thing I'm going to play here is what his agent, Darren Ferris, came out and said on a podcast just a few days ago when talking about how he kind of wanted things to go, and when he was asked one of the reasons why Mitch left Toronto.
Well, now that you brought it up, we can ask it. How do you? I mean, this was a noisy year for Mitch Marner and for you.
But
how did you manage that?
Well, one part people don't always see is the toll the social media, mainstream coverage can take on a player and their family. You know, Mitch went through years of that. At the end of every season, instead of being able to breathe and reset, and his family were bracing for the storm. You know, the negativity, the blame, the hate, it was just directed at him and spilled over to other people closest to him. That creates a dangerous environment. And there were even times where, you know, police had to be involved. Through it all, you know, Mitch showed incredible strength. But at the end of the day, he's more than a hockey player. He's a son, a brother, and now a new father, you know, to a young boy. And protecting that side of him has always been just as important as negotiating the contract. It wasn't about chasing the last dollar. He had opportunities to make more money elsewhere, but you know what mattered to him was finding a place, you know, he could focus on playing the game he loves. You know, where his family could feel safe and where he had a real chance to compete for a Stanley Cup.
And then right around the same time as that was going on, Marner was on TSN and had this to say when basically given the floor to talk about the same situation.
Agent Darren Ferris, he was on the 100% Hockey podcast. Recently, he spoke about some of the stuff you had to go through in Toronto. Mm-hmm. Your address being posted on social media, stuff thrown in your yard, even a death threat. Mm-hmm. Like, what was it like dealing with that?
It was a lot. Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously, I was just saying, you know, game 1 and 2 went amazing against Florida. You know, game 3 to 5 went really bad. 3 was actually a really good game. Went to, I think, overtime where they scored, you know, late in the game to win it. But, you know, we lose game 7 as we do, in a non-enjoyable way of all time, probably. You know, get home, you're pretty disappointed, you're pretty devastated at that. You know, the thought also of it being my last Maple Leaf game at home. And then I get a phone call probably about 5 or so minutes after from, I think it was my wife's father called me and goes, I just want to let you know we've got people sending us screenshots of a guy posting your address online, saying that if people want to come pay us a visit and say, you know, their goodbyes in a quotation way, here's the address. And it was a little tough, obviously. I mean, we kind of dealt with it for the last 2 years in a way. I mean, the market's very passionate. They love the team. I mean, I know it. I was born and raised there. I've been a part of the Leafs Nation for a long time. But yeah, when your family safety comes into question, especially having a new son, I don't think it's acceptable. You know, having full-time security pretty much at your house for 2 weeks after the playoffs just to make sure no one's coming to the house. You know, also the safety-wise of trying to walk your dog and your child. So it was a little unfortunate, but yeah, it's, you know, we all deal with this stuff. You know, it's just, sometimes it happens.
All right, so the stage is set. Now, you know, Dangle is obviously going to respond to something like this. It's his team, it's his players in terms of his channel. So, of course, he's going to have something to say. So I watched it and I was left definitely not lacking in opinions. The first thing is Dangle's letting everybody know a message that he got a few years ago from one of Marner's security agents.
about like his young family's safety. Here, I'm going to read you something. And you let me know how this comes across. You piece of shit. Shut the fuck up about Marner. You know zero about the game, you little puke. You'll never get to speak to him again. So if I got that message from an angry fan, which when I first read it, I was like, oh, okay, well, like that's run of the mill. I get stuff like that all the time. You're a piece of shit. You're a fat fuck. You don't know how to skate, whatever. I get that all the time. Shut the fuck up. One day your kid's going to kill himself because of your videos. Yeah, you get stuff like that all the time, which is why I don't post them anymore. But when I got that message, everything was run-of-the-mill threatening, but run-of-the-mill until that last sentence. You'll never get to speak to Mitch again. And I went, who the hell is this? That's Marner's personal security guy. Personal security guy. This was June 2nd, 2021. So a couple days after
the Montreal loss.
The Montreal loss. So, these guys have been sensitive since more than last year.
Well, all right. So now that sounds bad enough, right? Why are they sending that kind of a message to Dangle? Adam fills in a little bit of the gap, though, that I haven't seen many people talking about.
I'll just speak to that. Ago. We were blamed for something another podcast did. Because there was another podcast out there that apparently, and I didn't hear this clip, so I can't really verify.
Yeah, I don't know.
There was another podcast that apparently said something along the lines of, people should dump garbage on his front lawn because he played like it or something like that. And we've never said that, and we never would, right? Like if I could say he played like garbage, that's acceptable. Saying you should go to his house and dump garbage on it is probably somebody who's younger at the game in terms of like media and not realizing that those words, as I mentioned, the word attacked, they matter. You can't do that. And so we got sort of lumped in with them.
Okay. So we've got Ferris, Marner's agent, talking about the things that happened, including death threats. You've got Marner talking about his address being posted online, and he's worried about the safety of his kid, walking his dog. And now you've got Dangle relaying the story, that a message that one of his security agents had sent to him years ago. And Adam kind of gives a little bit of context there and says, hey, look, yeah, we did get that message, but we kind of got lumped in with this thing where there was somebody on another podcast telling Leaf fans to go throw garbage on Marner's lawn. Okay. Now, Dangle goes on to try to, I hate to say the word make excuses, but he's kind of making excuses because the implication here is that these things are only happening with Leaf fans. And so Dangle is going to read from his phone here and talk about how a lot of these things have happened in other places, although he does admit that it seems to be happening more than once, twice, 3 times in Toronto.
The fact that you hope the Leafs never win again and you hope Mitch wins immediately is because this is the only place where this happens. Okay, well, everyone put their hand up, and if you hear your name, put it down. Stuart Skinner's wife reacts to their family received death threats from Edmonton Oilers fans. NHL, St. Louis police looking into threats made towards Avalanche's Nazem Kadri. Maple Leafs player received death threats after Patrick Laine hits. That was Cedric Pare. Cutter Gauthier says he has received death threats in aftermath of Flyers trade. NHL investigates Ovechkin death threat. Lightning's JT Brown gets death threats after protest. From death threats to corporate backlash, Russian NHL players in a very difficult spot. Panthers Michael Matheson, had death threats after hit on Canucks Elias Pettersson. Now, there are more than one example of Leaf fans, so don't worry, I will get to those. Jake DeBrus says he received death threats from Maple Leafs fans. Too many to count. Toronto Maple Leafs defenseman Thomas Caberlet was beloved by the fan base, and when Cam Jansen hit him, some fans didn't know how to handle it, and he received death threats. In the midst of controversy, Kevin Hayes addressed the situation regarding false claims linking him to Cutter Gauthier's decision not to sign with the Flyers. Kevin Hayes says he got death threats over media members making shit up. Elvis Merzlikins, the Blue Jackets' current starting goalie, while Joonas Korpisalo recovers from injury, has struggled to start the season behind a weak team. Today, his wife revealed that their family has received death threats from Blue Jackets fans. NHL fan favorite referee Wes McCauley and Toronto Maple Leafs fans have been butting heads since blah, blah, blah. Leaf fans sent death threats to Wes McCauley. I don't have to read the whole headline for all of you. Timo Meier received a death threat from St. Louis Blues fans after his hand pass goal in 2019. Former Canucks draft pick report. Do I have to?
Yeah,
go on, or have I made my point?
All right, so you see where we are at this point. Now, there's a lot of people commenting that Marner's playing the victim, and then there's a lot of people commenting that Steve shouldn't be sticking up for the fans that are doing this. And of course, they're trying to mitigate things by saying, well, those really aren't our fans. Now, I can give you a little bit of perspective on this. And as a Panthers channel, you would think I don't have any, but we actually do. Since the first run to the Cup, since the 22-23 season, my son and I have streamed every single Panthers game, including all of the playoffs. And we've also streamed full series like Tampa and Toronto. We've streamed a lot of Toronto games as well. And this channel, I have a lot of good Toronto Leaf fans. I've got people that have been paying members for this channel for more than a year, maybe even 2 years, that are Leaf fans. So I'm certainly not here to dunk on them. But I can only give you what my experience has been, what our experience has been streaming these games. Now, we've played, if memory serves me correctly, the Panthers being we, over the playoff runs, we played Boston twice, Tampa twice, Toronto twice. Is that right? The Canes twice, and then we played the Rangers, but we played a lot of these other teams twice. Now, over the course of all of those years, I've had to block one Boston Bruins fan, no Tampa Bay fans during the streams. I should be clear here. The rule to the stream chat is just be cool. Just be cool, right? We don't mind trash talking. We don't mind a little bit of riffraff between me and other people or between fans. We let mostly anything go unless it gets really, really personal or people start going after one of my kids. Now, we usually will, try to give people a timeout, and then if it gets really bad, they're going to get blocked. Over the course of the playoffs, all these 3 years, we've had to block one Boston Bruins fan, no Tampa Bay fans, no Ranger fans, and I think that there was one Carolina fan. Now, in terms of the Leaf fans that we've had to block, it usually averages about 2 a game. Now, not every game you have multiple. Sometimes you have none. Sometimes it's only one. And then sometimes it's 3 or 4. It got so bad this year, by the time we got to, I believe, game 3 or game 4, that we had to put the chat on subscriber only, and people were still subscribing just to say some pretty awful things, some pretty nasty things. I've had people go after me, my kids. I've had people make comments about my dogs that had passed away. Now, am I saying it's only Leaf fans? No, we've had one Boston fan, we had a Carolina fan, but we usually have no problems until we're playing Toronto and after we've beaten Toronto. With this year, we had to leave the streams subscriber only after the Toronto series because they just kept coming after us. So the other part to that, of course, is that I have a noon stream every day during the season and the playoffs. And what Marner and his agent are talking about in terms of death threats and the names being posted online, address being posted online and everything, for at least 2 weeks, while all that was going on a daily basis at the noon stream, we had to remove 2 or 3, using quotes, Leaf fans who were coming to the chat and disrupting everything by telling everybody that it was actually Panthers fans that were posting Marner's address and giving him death threats. Now, we don't have this problem with any other fan base, not even close. 95 or more % of the people that we've had to block over the 3 years we've been streaming have been at least presenting themselves as Toronto Maple Leaf fans. So, what, in my opinion, is the issue? It's easy to just say, well, those people are crazy, and I'm using the words that Dangle and his crew used. You know, he tried to distance themselves from them. But to me, I can give you a little bit more perspective of what I think is going on specifically in Toronto, but I got to use a football analogy to do it. I grew up in Miami. I grew up in the 80s as a Dolphins fan. Now, if you grew up watching the Dolphins, especially Marino, and it was after we had been the champs in the 70s and the undefeated, and we still were going to Super Bowls in the 80s, as a kid, you kind of felt like Miami was either the center of the football universe or one of the teams. Miami, Dallas, the Bears, Pittsburgh, those 4 franchises especially were kind of elevated in terms of notoriety than everybody else. And so what would happen is that sports talk, now obviously there wasn't the internet back then, but there was sports talk radio. And my uncle would take me to a lot of the games. My uncle was a fan, huge Dolphin fan, but he also watched the game from a unbiased perspective. We would sit in the stadium, and before the game, he would point out the left guard sucks. We can't stop the run. This guy's going to be a problem. This linebacker, this corner. He would point out to me which players were going to be a problem, because he understood that just because media down there in sports talk and just because of the atmosphere, it didn't mean that the Dolphins were the best team every year, even though the media down there would tell you that this is the year we're going to win a Super Bowl. The same thing that Leaf fans go through right now every year with, is this the year? Is this the year for the core 4 and all that? I grew up doing that with Dan Marino. And what I would watch happen at the stadium and on sports talk, because that was the only outlet people had, was people would be calling in furious. It would be ruining their week when the Dolphins would lose. And they would be specifically complaining about parts of the team that my uncle had been warning me about the entire time. That corner, that safety, that linebacker, that lineman. And so I learned to, as best I could, watch my own team from an objective position, to the point that when I started this channel and the Panthers weren't very good, I was pretty much 100% critical of the way that they did things. Now, of course, all that is amplified in Toronto now because you have social media. You have an entire, Dangle is the biggest hockey creator other than the hockey guy and maybe a couple of others. But in terms of somebody who's started their channel with, being for one team, Dangle's it, right? And so my opinion is that Toronto fans, not all of them, but in general, they've been gaslit. And I said this last year during the playoffs, and I kind of had empathy for some of the people that were coming to the chat before the Panthers series and after the Panthers series. A lot of you have been gaslit by podcasts, by the media, by just the overall ambiance that Toronto has in terms of, quote, being the center of the hockey universe. I kind of feel like Toronto fans have been gaslit into believing the team is better than they actually are. I'm not saying that they're bad. And I'm not saying that if they hadn't run into Florida a couple of these times, that they might not have, maybe they could have won the conference. I don't think they would have beaten Vegas or Edmonton or Colorado for that matter. But could they have won the conference if Florida wasn't around? I suppose that's possible. But what I see happening to Toronto fans especially is exactly what happened to Dolphin fans in the 80s. Matthews, Marino, you've got this core group of guys that you figure they're so good, how can they not win? And it creates an unrealistic expectation created by the media. And then when those expectations are not met, year after year after year after year, eventually a portion of the fan base becomes rabid, for lack of a better phrase. And that is the only explanation that I can come to for the behavior that seems to be, it happens in a lot of different places, but I think it's fairly obvious that it happens more in Toronto than it happens anywhere else. And I think what I just said is the reason why. Now, of course, there's always going to be the crazies. Every fan base is going to have their crazies. And I'm sure that there are people saying we're Leaf fans and doing these things, and they're really not Leaf fans. They're just troublemakers on the internet. But to circle back to the hockey part about it, to close this up, the only thing that really disappointed me was the attitude that Marner should stop complaining and acting like a victim. Now, if you're talking about somebody just tweeting a Marner, you suck, and stuff like that, I can agree to that. But when the dude's address is being posted online, and you're also combining that with getting death threats, and you're also combining that with your wife just had a baby, I would be willing to bet that the overwhelming majority of people that are saying Marner should stop trying to act like a victim don't have kids. Because once you have kids, your mindset completely changes about that stuff, and you realize that you can't be too careful. Now, does he bear some responsibility? He certainly bears some responsibility for some of the behavior. Okay, if people are criticizing him more than other players and blaming him, that's a fan-player dynamic that's been since the beginning of time. It's been that way. But he's not responsible for anybody that got gaslit to the point or the posting his address and giving death threats and things like that. But the last thing I would say is for the good Leaf fans out there, just, try to be cool with the other fan bases in the NHL. If you scroll into almost any video there in the NHL and you see the chat, Leaf fans do have a specific reputation. Some of it's earned, some of it's not. But for me, I think some of the parts of the reputation that are earned, I kind of feel bad for Leaf fans because I think most years you guys are sold a bill of goods by people that are just trying to drum up clicks, and they make money. And they make money by telling you all that the team might be a little bit better than they really are. And then they hang you out to dry when you guys have been gaslit and you act like a little bit Cocoa Puffs because everybody told you how good the team was. You're being gaslit. A lot of Leaf fans, I have empathy for you. I kind of feel like this didn't happen in a bubble. It didn't all happen by itself. There's a specific reason it's happening in Toronto. And to me, at the end of the day, while certain fans and everybody's responsible for their own behavior, I can't do anything but put most of the blame on the media gaslighting that fan base.